This fall, bring the beauty of the Rabbit Room into your own community with House Moot. It's a self-hosted gathering where your living room, church, or backyard becomes a place for shared stories, songs, and sacred conversations. With recorded sessions, recipes, activities, discussion questions, and a gathering guide, we'll set the table for you. All you have to do is bring the guests. Get everything you need to host your own House Moot at rabbitroom.com/housemoot.
Hello friends, it's Jonathan Rogers. I'm happy to report that the Habit Writer Development cohorts are coming back in January of 2026. This 6-week small group intensive is for writers who want to take their development seriously in the new year. This time there'll be 8-person cohorts for both fiction and nonfiction writers. The writer development cohorts are a big commitment. They aren't a fit for everybody. But I'm giving away the first 3 lectures of the 6-week experience as part of a mini course to give writers an idea of what the cohorts are about. I'm calling it Cohort Week 0. Besides the 3 short lectures, Week 0 will also include Zoom discussions and a writing exercise or 2. Whether you join a cohort or not, this mini course will be a great way to kickstart your writing through the holiday season and beyond. The lectures are designed to empower you to think bigger about your writing, to help you discover ideas that you didn't know you had, and to convince you that not having a destination yet doesn't mean you're lost in the writing process. Join Cohort Week 0 for free at thehabit.co/development. That's thehabit.co/development. I'll also put a link in the show notes.
Who are you, oh man, to try to explain God's mercies or his love or his operation in just your own life? Like, we're always tackling subjects bigger than ourselves. And it might help, it's just an artistic technique to get used to failing at that, but to use whatever techniques of failure we have.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Mischa Willett is a poet and a writing professor. He's the director of the Whitworth Writers Workshop MFA in Creative Writing at Whitworth University in Spokane, Washington. I met Mischa when we ended up at the same lunch table at Hutchmoot last month. That lunch was too short, so I invited him on the podcast to continue our conversation. In this episode, Mischa Willett and I talk about MFA programs, teaching writing, and apology letters written by robots. Mischa Willett, I'm so happy to have you on the Habit Podcast. I love your work, and I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining me.
100%. I'm super glad to be here. Thanks for having me. It's a gracious gesture.
You are, besides being a poet, you run the MFA program at Whitworth University. Let's start there. I want to hear about that program, what makes it distinctive. Well, the floor is open for you to talk about the MFA program that you run.
Sure. Actually, this program is it's very hopeful for me. It's sort of an act of resurrection. So the program used to exist at Seattle Pacific University. There was an MFA program for over the last 20 years. That was the first at all religiously affiliated MFA that you could have in America. It was founded by Gregory Wolfe, who also founded Image Magazine at a time when there weren't a lot of options for people of faith to publish things that were sort of frowned upon in the public sphere and in the artistic space particularly. And it did really well. Our graduates have published over 100 books in the last 2 decades. It's a low residency kind of affair. So that means we get the best writers from all over the world to be mentors because they don't have to move to wherever we are. And it also means we can draw students from all over the world. And we do. We have people from Sweden and from London and wherever else. Anybody that wants to do serious writing, like at a graduate level, like a publishing kind of level, but doesn't want to quiet the part of their lives that's concerned with faith. Whatever the faith is, however, robust or withering it might be. People need space to think about that and to work through those kinds of things. So when SPU was going through some kind of financial crises a couple of years ago, they were just cutting programs all over the place to try to make their bottom line work. And they cut this program. And so we shopped it around. So I used to work there. I used to work for this program when I was at Seattle Pacific.
Yeah. When you say Seattle Pacific is what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
Seattle Pacific University, yeah.
Right. So we took the program on the road, and we're like, does someone want to? Because it does fine financially. It pays for itself. So there were a number of institutions interested in hosting us, some on the East Coast, some in the South.
Yeah.
We one in California. We ended up landing at Whitworth, partly
I'm
because it's
sorry.
still in the Pacific Northwest.
I'm sorry. When you say you shopped it, were you literally doing a road show the way you would do if you were looking for
Essentially,
venture
yeah.
capital? Yeah.
So the poet Scott Cairns was the director at the time,
Yeah.
and they gave us enough time because legally we had to teach out the program. Any students we admitted, we had to teach them through the end of their degree. So we had
Yeah.
a couple of years before they shut it down where we weren't allowed to admit new students, but we still were alive. So
Yeah.
we traveled around the country to other colleges and said, hey man, we got this program. The faculty want to come over. There's plenty of student interest. Do you want to like grant the degree for us? And Whitworth gave the most resounding yes. And that made me very hopeful about the state of Christian higher education, but also about this
Uh-huh.
place. Because, at the same time, Whitworth happens to be, they're expanding their theater program at the same time as theater programs being canceled everywhere else.
Yeah.
And then I read in the local newspaper here, it's called the Spokesman Review, that there was a church closing down. They couldn't sustain it, but they had all this beautiful like tapestry work and stonework, and
Uh-huh.
they didn't want to just have it smashed or taken to the junkyard. Christians had invested in that, both time and talent, for years.
Yeah.
And so Whitworth took that on, and now it's over in the cafeteria. And just
Really?
those things combine in my head to think like, yeah, that's exactly what these places are supposed to be. Like, we're going to
Yeah.
steward creativity, even if it was created elsewhere, into the future.
Yeah. And so you're in Spokane, Washington. The Whitworth is in Spokane, Washington.
Yeah, so I've just moved my family over here. We've lived here for 3 months, and we're launching the program now. It's a little strange because we had to wind it completely down and then have to start it
Yeah.
up from zero. So none of the students were
Mhm.
allowed to come over or credits. So our first cohort of writers will be here in July,
Okay.
on campus. And then they do like distance work in between. So they don't have to move out here. They come out for 2 10-day residencies per year.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Um, okay. Talk to me about, I often do get questions from people around the Habit about MFA programs, what they're for, should I do an MFA program or not? And I know that's something you spend a lot of time talking about. So I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your version of, the answer to the question, is an MFA right for me?
Why is that the thing? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I did one and had a great time with it.
Okay.
All of our writers that are mentors in our program went through different MFA programs. I think everyone went through residential programs, which means you move there and
Mhm.
you live sort of in community with people and you see them more or less every day. Um, Even then, though, I was jealous of the SPU model, this one, in part because I think it's a better setup for an author's actual life.
Yeah.
Like you don't get rescued from your day job or your
Uh-huh.
parenting or whatever the things, or even the boring city that you live in, like
Yeah.
so some of our greatest, graduates live in, God bless them, in the middle of Kentucky or North Dakota. And it's like
Yeah.
you could have moved to New York and had a very exciting artistic community. And then what, you go back there and feel like you're missing out for the rest of your life? Like
Uh,
the way this program is set up anyways, you get an actual look at what it's like, the hard and lonely work of being a writer, at the same time as you're bolstered with someone guiding you through the choices that you're trying to make and through the professionalization process. And you get to come together on the regular to like get filled back up, in the way that people
yeah.
do with gatherings like the Rabbit Room, like Hutchmoot, right? It's the high
Yeah.
point of people's year. And you feel like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I get coached on this for all this time, right? Um, but an MFA in general, well, one, it's a terminal degree, so it's as far as you can go in studying the arts. Uh,
Yeah.
so if you're going to be a painter, if you're going to be a singer, or if you're going to be a writer, like an MFA is the top degree that you can have. So essentially, it's for people that want to take this thing as seriously as they can. I'm a huge
Yeah.
believer in rapacious amateurism. Like people should just do things. People should just make things if they can, if they want to.
Yeah.
And the world is better for it, and the kingdom is better for it. But there are some people who want to go all the way, who think like, yeah, but I really have something. I really want to develop this craft in as much as other people's input can help you develop a craft. Some people want that for their writing lives.
Yeah.
Um, and it opens doors, of course. I mean, and an MFA certifies you to teach all the way through the graduate level.
Uh-huh.
Depending on the state that you're in, it lets you teach secondary school, primary school, of course, but also college. So if people want to end up being teachers of creative writing at the college level or to offer workshops and seminars, some of our graduates go on to do like sort of health and healing writing. They work in prisons or in
Uh-huh.
old folks' home or in churches. Some of them run residencies, like they have a beautiful property for whatever reason, and they invite people into it to workshop or
Yeah.
deal with creative blockage or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So there's a number of sort of career paths that fork out from this thing, but I think the starting place is when people think, yeah, I want this thing in full gear. I want to see how fast I can make this car go, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there people who you say MFA is not right for you?
Yeah, well, we actually have a pretty good attrition rate. People join the program, usually love it and follow it through. Um, but there are sometimes people who they write in too many genres for it to be useful.
Hmm.
They're, again, and there's no shade on this term, but like they're dabblers. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I got a novel kind of going, and then I write these devotional things. I also take myself pretty seriously as a poet and a sermon writer, but then I write songs, and it's like those are wonderful. Like, dude, please be that. But an
Yeah.
MFA is so focused. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, we want to make you the best fiction writer you can possibly be.
Yeah.
That I think that could be irksome for people that are doing I don't want to say more than one thing. More than one is fine, but if you're doing more than three, like that might not be.
Yeah.
Because our program actually, you end up getting the way it's structured. You get instruction in other genres as a matter of course, so you don't have to opt
Uh-huh.
into it. People who aren't interested in writing fiction will end up hearing some things about fiction making uh, from expert
Yeah.
novelists and maybe be tempted, right? Maybe
Yeah.
lean over that way, which I think is good because you know I write essays, I write scholarly work, I do editing. I never write fiction. I have no idea how these people they're like magicians who come up with stories and characters and names and all that. It sounds ridiculous. Even when I try to do it for my children, I just have no talent for it. But I do find so when my first book came out, it was selling okay, and then it got really good reviews, and that didn't help much. And I was just surprised. I thought, well, surely people are going to see the reviews and just rush out to the
Yeah.
local, you know. And then I wrote some piece for, I think it was Gospel Coalition at the time. And my poetry book sales increased like 800%. Like,
Wow.
and it's like, oh, okay. So people don't buy poetry books because you write them, and they don't buy them because they see an ad, and they don't buy them when they get outstanding reviews. But then if you just write some essay that's not even about poetry, they see your name and then they go back and buy it.
Interesting.
So, I
Yeah.
do find this multi-genre work to be useful, and training in it to be useful. But that's one group that I would say, an MFA might not be right for you at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just remembering, uh, just as we've started talking, I read an article from you recent, and now I can't remember where I saw it. Um, but it was an essay you had written about um, why, in a cultural moment like ours, people need to be um, getting MFAs or just doing creative work.
Yeah.
Could you remind me
Yeah,
what was
that might
going
have
on in that
been
essay?
Jen Pollock Michelle did an
That
interview on
that
her
sounds right.
Substack, which I thought suddenly might be also called The Habit, or I think just The Habit with Jen Pollock Michelle. She works on Christian devotional kind of
Yeah,
space, helping people to cultivate godly habits, especially
yeah.
artistic habits as well.
She's been on this
And she's
podcast a
actually a
couple of
mentor in our
times.
program.
Yeah,
So we've just hired her. She'll be out here in the summer. Yeah, this is something that's been, well, and not just on my mind, it's been sort of in the mind for a while now as AI gobbles up more and more of what used to be human creativity. And I
yeah,
mean that in the most boring of ways, like the fact that it's polishing students' writing well, as a writing teacher, I don't like it, but that doesn't cost so much as, for example, I had a student who I caught using AI on a paper, okay, an undergraduate.
Uh-huh.
MFA students don't do this, but an undergraduate who wrote a paper, and it's very easy for me to tell still. AI might get so good eventually that we can't tell, but people who pay attention to language can tell. Like no
Yeah.
human would do it that way, right? So I
Yeah.
called him out on it, and it was a Christian school setting, so he was, repenting and oh my gosh, I'm sorry I broke your trust and things like that. And then I caught another student doing it in the same class, and I said, I know that you used generative AI on this, and that's forbidden in our syllabus, et cetera, et cetera. And I got the same email apology from the student because they had both had AI write their apologies
Oh.
for getting caught using AI. And I just thought, oh my Lord, that can't be happening. You have a computer doing repentance and relationship repair for you. Forget the irony that you're doing it for that same crime. But I just thought, oh my gosh, if you can't own up to your mistakes and just put in words the crimes you've committed against your own intelligence, much less
Yeah.
against the community that you've signed up to be a part of. Um, you know, I shudder to think, especially people get a hold of it early. Like I drove
Yeah.
here to my office this morning. Every single kid at the bus stop was looking at their phones and not talking to each other, or looking at the marvelous gold and red foliage all around them,
Yeah.
like, or at each other's faces to fall in love. I mean, all of it. They were all of them looking down at screens, and I don't know what they're doing on them, but I just think this. We're lucky, you and I, in a way, to have grown up, but without these challenges
Yeah.
kind of people that don't get their linguistic centers even formed. They don't because there's a more powerful option literally at the flick of their finger. I shudder to
Yeah.
think what community is going to be like for them, or getting into a marriage where you have to communicate all the time.
Yeah.
If you're used to
Yeah.
having something else write your apologies and better than you can write them. you
Yeah.
know so I think an antidote to that is art making. I think the personal, the local, the colloquial stands, against the ruination that the tech overlords have in store for us. I think,
Yeah.
and part of that is just making stuff in silos, just on your own. I think it's an act of
Hmm.
rebellion. People go into their garage and carving little crosses they sell on Etsy, whatever it is. Like that's human and holy work,
Yeah.
in response to this. But then also in your church, which I've always thought churches should be the most beautiful places in the world. I They are in a lot of the world, but the kind of churches I go to, I'm not a Catholic, so I don't get beautiful churches, you know, full
Yeah.
of full of carvings and tapestries and paintings and everything like that. But even like, why aren't the flower beds more astonishing in front of every church building?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's a thing. We have these hands. We're supposed to do something with them. So even if you're not like making poems, or you can't sing, surely you can get a hold of some zinnias, you know,
Yeah.
or some mums in the autumn and put them in that the neighbors might be blessed and
Yeah.
God glorified through just that.
Yeah. Yeah. I often talk about the idea of tending to your little patch of ground,
Yeah.
loving it into beauty, um,
Yeah.
for the sake of the people who pass through, but also because you're making the world a little bit more like the world you want to live in when you do
Right.
that.
Right. Well, and it's for you too. Like I think
Yeah.
the artist, no, I know, I don't think this. I know that like giving poetry readings, I hope it's a blessing to the audience, but I know it's nourishing for me.
Yeah.
To like get to give some people something crafted, something fine, that
Yeah.
does something to the deliverer as well.
Yeah. Hey, how would you describe the relationship between your own art making and your role as a person who equips other people to make their own art?
Yeah, that's interesting. Uh, One of the reasons it's super helpful to have, to use the phrase like a dog in this fight, is I'm equipped to understand the kinds of challenges young writers are likely to face, having
Yeah.
been one not so long ago.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that, they're really basic things like I go through dry periods in my writing.
Yeah.
Um, thankfully I translate poetry, and that's what I do when I can't write anything original, so
Yeah.
that I can always be working somehow. But that used to freak me out, and I mean a lot. Like I wouldn't be able to come up with any good ideas for poems for a week, and then it's 2 weeks, and then it's a month, and I start thinking, am I really a writer? And does
Yeah.
Jesus love me? Like I get existential very quickly. Am I worth anything? Am I contributing anything to the story of humanity? Um, and my students go through that. The MFA writers, even if some of them are older than me. I have writers in their 60s and
Yeah.
70s who come to the program
Yeah.
as well. And if they haven't spent much time in those traces, right? Even if you spend a lot of time on the earth, you tend to freak out. You think, oh my gosh, I've got nothing. Am I out?
Yeah.
Is the well dry?
Yeah.
And you learn like there are ways of replenishing the well, but also it's okay to just rest.
Yeah.
Like it'll come back, that and is it Andy Dillard who has that wonderful thing in the writing life where the caterpillar climbs to the end of the branch and thinks, what? Is this the end of the world?
Yeah.
And then they get to the next one. What? End of world?
Yeah.
Eventually you just stop saying that. You're like, oh, yes, the fruitfulness seems to be gone and the color drained from my life. But,
Yeah.
if winter comes, can spring be far behind?
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
As a cycle of the world, but also in the artistic life. And so being a worker in these fields helps immensely to be able to say those things and believe them, not just because it's like the wisdom you would give to a student, but because, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I've done that before too. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, working in the other direction, how has teaching shaped your work as a poet?
Mm. You know, one of the funny emotions I didn't expect to feel is a kind of jealousy of my students. So sometimes they'll go through. I mean, part of it is I'm jealous of their reading lives because,
Uh-huh.
and this is a strange thing. I don't know if this is unique to me, but it's odd. So this just happened last week. One of my former students asked for a book recommendation, and I gave it to her, and she started reading it. And I've read this book, and I'm sitting over here across the country, jealous of the fact that she gets to read it.
Yeah.
Like I have it. It's right over there behind
Yeah.
me. I could probably do the same thing. But
Yeah,
I don't
but you
know.
don't get to read it for the first time again.
Yes, when there's a grand adventure and someone's on it and you set them on it, there's
Yeah.
this like, oh man, I can't believe you get to have that. And you don't even know what's going to happen next. Like, do you remember like when Harry Potter was going around? Like, I lived in London at the time and everyone on the tube was reading it. Everyone,
Yeah.
like, not
Yeah.
everyone, but half the people I saw were reading it. And you could see because of the thickness of the book where they were.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
remember sitting there looking around thinking, oh man, you don't know what's going to happen next, but holy cow,
Yeah.
you're in for it.
Yeah, it's so
It was
good.
so exciting to share those solo experiences. But also, because I get to see so much work, because people write things and sometimes they're duds. And my job is to
Yeah.
say, oh, that's a cancerous limb. You don't need that. Cut that off. Your whole life will be more fruitful. Stop following that path. Um, but some of it is just so astonishing. And I think, my
Yeah.
goodness, I love seeing them develop. It always happens between year 1 and 2 in the MFA. They've read 30 books at that point that we've assigned and written Lord knows how many words, whether they're fiction writers or creative nonfiction, whatever it is. And then by the second year, something just sort of catches and they start to get
Mm.
what we call their own voice underneath
Yeah.
them. And it feels like there's a brand new thing in the world, like there's a
Yeah.
poet being born right there, a new way of using language, a new way of looking at the world that didn't exist even 12 months ago. And you see that enough times, I just feel like I'm walking around lost in astonishment half the time, like,
Yeah.
man, there's that. Oh my gosh, and now
Yeah.
there's this too. And
Yeah.
and I don't know, it's not like I take actual tricks or techniques from them, but I do take
Right.
a heaping dose of inspiration and
Yeah.
confidence in the future of our literary world.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, you mentioned the part of your role is to tell somebody you got to lop this limb off.
Yeah.
And I've had so many in teaching writers, I've had so many good moments that came from the
Yeah.
time that turned in a bad piece.
Yeah.
And a lot of times even when I just teach a 1-day seminar, say, I'll have people, I just did this last weekend, I had people read 2 samples of not very good writing and good writing, and we discussed them. And then I said, the same person wrote both of these a week apart.
Yeah.
And it is such a helpful moment in a writer's life to see
Right.
this piece doesn't work. That doesn't mean I'm a failure.
Right.
I can keep doing this. And when writers can get past that, it's such a great moment in their development.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, I I just pruned my apple tree this weekend.
Uh-huh.
And because we just moved here 3 months ago, and I have these trees now that no one has taken care of for years. And what happens is the branches get laden with fruit and then they get heavy and then they break. And the tree will
Uh-huh.
die if that happens enough times, right? So just a couple of days ago, I was wielding a chainsaw in my yard and cutting off these limbs, which looked kind of bad to me. And then I cut them,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Oh, holy cow! Those are hollow inside." Like that was not going to make it
Yeah.
over the year. And of course, the hope is that by spring, new shoots will come out, and we'll get a good harvest, and I'll actually get cider out of the deal, you
Yeah.
know. And I don't think it's that different. It's
Hmm.
because what the tree does is it expends energy trying to maintain those crippled branches instead of
Yeah.
energy it could be using making fruit.
Yeah.
That's what's happening, horticulturally speaking. And as a writer, I've been so blessed not just as a writer, as an artist, so blessed when someone told me no.
Yes.
I could have been a very average photographer. I took a lot of photography classes.
Uh-huh.
And other people were better at it than me in the class. I remember being an undergraduate when we do like shows. I'm like, dang, that person, dang. And mine are like, well, here. I mean, I'm trying, and I loved it. I felt very nourished by making photographs. Um, but I just didn't have it. And
Yeah.
I tried acting too,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
like I could be great and tempestuous, but I had no consistency. And someone said that to me, and good Lord, I mean, I would have spent 4 or 5 years going on auditions and eating top ramen to try to make it. It's something I was
Yeah.
never going to be that good at.
Yeah. Yeah. Those
And
limits tell you
yeah,
here's what you can do.
that's right.
He, you can't do, you're not a very good photographer. Apparently you weren't a very good actor,
Yeah.
but poetry you can do.
And
And once
thank
you lock
God.
those
Yeah.
off,
And,
good things
and that's
happen.
what we need guides for. Like this whole notion that, and again, I feel bad because my fourth child is about to be born by Christmas.
Uh,
So I'm thinking about their sort of levels in generation all the time. Um, but like all the messaging, because I don't watch movies or TV myself very much. That's not a genre I'm very good at getting into. I try to watch one movie every year to like stay
okay.
current in as much as I have a friend who recommends which one I should see. But I end up now because my kids watching a bunch of, Disney fare and things aimed at young people. And so much of the messaging is close your ears to the advice, believe in yourself, go for
Yeah.
it, do
Yeah.
it no matter what. And I'm like, that is so damaging. Like, so my
Yeah.
wife is a ballet teacher. She's a
Uh,
choreographer, and she worked at the most Pacific Northwest Ballet. It's like one of the biggest, ballet companies around. And a part of her job is she teaches, young people and then into adulthood is to tell people, the way your feet are built, you're not gonna make it. You're not gonna do anything. And there's
mm,
nothing they can do. It's you were born without ligaments that do X, right?
yeah.
And I applaud your determination, and you're of course welcome to continue. But to have to say no to people, I mean, it's of course devastating because what little girl doesn't want to be a ballerina, right?
Yeah.
But those parents are paying from the time they're 4 years old. And that's not even the big bills. Once they get into teenagers, you have to start sending them places, and it's 4 grand
Mhm.
for every summer that you. And so she's doing them a grace in all kinds of ways. Like,
Yeah.
no matter how hard you believe in yourself, your foot won't be able to do the thing it needs to be able to do. You'll hurt yourself. You will actually hurt if
Uh-huh.
you try to stand on toes the way your toes are. You're gonna fall down. You're gonna be crippled. You're not gonna be able to walk by the time you're 50.
Yeah.
And that's grace. It sounds like the hardest thing in the world, but she's saying you don't have to spend your time this way. You don't have to spend your money this way. Don't have to hurt yourself. Find another thing to do. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I always think, man, like that's the best news you could have gotten in some cases.
How do those conversations go typically? Do people
Um,
receive that news
you know,
with
a
gratitude?
lot of times, well, they're usually tearful. And then she gets these huge thank yous and hugs, not least from the parents, who are
Yeah,
like,
right.
look, doc, just give it to me straight. You know, everybody who's had a medical issue knows that. Like, I really don't want you like messing around, using euphemisms like, well, it might not be good. Tell me exactly how long I have, And I just think in artistic circles, we've been so programmed to puff people up because they lack confidence at the beginning that sometimes we don't give them the grace of saying, that's a dead end, do something different. Not for the whole thing, but I mean, as poets, just I have poems that I've been working on for 15 years. That's not,
Uh-huh.
I'm a very slow and odd sort of writer. I'm always writing around 80 to 100 poems at once that are in
Hmm.
various states of
Uh-huh.
dress. And every day I try to push them as far as I can go. And maybe I don't know enough yet. I'm not
Yeah.
emotionally ready to finish that, or I haven't read enough yet. I'm not smart enough. I'm not holy enough. Whatever the thing that poem
Yeah.
needs, I don't have it. So I'll just try something else. And every once in a while, I cut one free, and it just feels like a limb has gone, and I
Yeah.
can feel like I've lost weight. I'm like, that's not on my mind anymore. And praise the Lord for it.
By
So
the
what I
way,
would advise to my MFA writers, I work with just the poets sometimes in
mhm.
a mentor relationship. Um, I hear two things. One, I hear them talk to each other, and they say, "Oh yeah, I cried too when I got my first criticism from Mischa." Like that's a thing they know to expect. In part because they never receive feedback before. Some people are like,
Yeah.
their husbands read it or their pastor like, oh, this is
Yeah, right.
great, keep going, this is great, which is good. They should say that. But
Yeah.
especially with poetry, it's about your father dying, and
Yeah.
you get told, okay, you need to write that for yourself, and I'm glad you did, but don't show it to anybody. Like that's one for you. That's not one that
Yeah.
anybody else needs. You can
Yeah.
stop doing that now. And then every single one of them comes back, usually at graduation. And they're like, thank you so much for that. I needed someone to tell me what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what's going to work, what isn't going to work, where I should pour
Yeah.
my energies, because it's so bewildering to just sort of start writing onto this blank page staring you in the face and hope something catches fire, right?
Yeah.
It turns out people have been there before and we know how to make fire. You can, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rub these kinds of
Yeah.
sticks, rub this rock next to this iron, and oh my gosh, sparks. But you could
Yeah.
spend the rest of your life hitting two rocks that don't have that quality together, and
Yeah.
you're gonna look like a caveman banging rocks together, and the rest of us are warm. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's why you need people who have done this, who say like, oh, I mean, feel free, but that's not gonna do anything for you.
Yeah. I know you may have already covered this topic, but I know you talk about using failure to get work done.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? I mean, maybe you've already said what you mean by that.
Yeah, well, we've got near it anyways. That's a big topic for me, in part because I fail so much,
No.
both as a person, as a believer, um, whatever, as a teacher, but as a writer also. So this is something I started thinking about. My PhD is in British Romantic poetry.
Hmm.
So I work on Shelley, Coleridge, Keats, Wordsworth, that lot. Um, and I started wondering when I read a lot of that stuff, how it happens that writers who are as good as, let's say, Keats, like just seems to come from another planet, just seems to be made of different
Yeah.
stuff. Where do these insights come from? How does someone who writes as well as he does sometimes write as badly as he does at other times?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I started working through theories for why that might be. What did he just, like me as an actor, lack consistency, or or something else going on? And what I came to is that often those poets, and then here through me and other poets that I work with, they were first of all tackling subjects for which they were ill-equipped. They were trying to
Hmm.
write bigger than themselves. They were trying to write beyond their experiential level,
Yeah.
beyond their theological depth. And that's
Uh-huh.
a weird thing. So you get poets like Percy Shelley, who thought he was an atheist, who went around saying he doesn't believe in God, but wrote some of the most divine poetry, like understanding how the Holy Spirit moves to regenerate someone's life. From a person who hates church, you know what I mean? Like, why?
Yeah.
How is that happening? And part of it is he's using his failure to understand these things as an engine to go into spaces that he can't get himself.
Huh.
And sometimes there's another feature that I thought was awfully strange. So the Romantics will write in fragments sometimes, and like not like we lost part of the manuscript and like here's the beginning of the poem. Like some poets are that way. Like the Greek poet Sappho, she only exists in fragments. She wrote whole poems, but worms ate the rest of them, and so now all we have is fragmentary bits. But people like Percy Shelley would write a poem and call it a fragment, not finishing the poem. And I just think, what is that? Why would you do it? Just finish the poem, man. They like take another swing at it. You could. Where would this have gone? And I think what he was doing. So here, by way of example, I take writers to Rome sometimes on study abroad trips. And if you go up the Michelangelo staircase in the Campidoglio, if you turn to the right, there's a sculpture of a hand. It's just someone's hand like this, okay? And I have pictures of my students next to it. It's about 6 feet tall, the hand. And so given a hand that size, you imagine how big the original sculpture must have been, right? Now, the part that I like about it is I think it was probably a sculpture once, and again, we just lost the rest of it, got burned or whatever. But I love the thought that you don't have to actually make that whole statue. You could just make a 6 foot tall hand, and you can't not imagine the rest of it, right? Because our sense of proportionality. We're like, oh my gosh. And so you've signaled some sense of an original conception beyond what you're actually capable of making by making the fragment so potent.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's something that I write about in a scholarly fashion about those poets. And I'm thinking about how it might help and furnish the Christian imagination, because of course that's what we're always trying to do. Could we think the ocean fill and were the skies of parchment made, right? To tell the love of God. Who are you, oh man, to try to explain God's mercies or his love or his operation in just your own life? Like, we're always tackling subjects bigger than ourselves. And it might help, it's just as an artistic technique, to get used to failing at that. But to use whatever techniques of failure we have. So, for example, I think in worship songs, functions a lot like that sometimes. And I sing, like a lot of Christian songs have a chorus like that.
Yeah.
And what it means is wonder. Is astonishment. That's the face we make when we're astonished and don't have words. Yeah. So what we're doing is voicing the words, I don't have words for this, that you are beyond language. Right.
Yeah.
Invisible. That's a taste of it anyways. It's something I recur. I've been writing about it for like 20 years in little margins and
it has him go invisible, ineffable, God only wise, in white, in light, inaccessible, hid from our eyes. It's that via negativa.
Right. Yes, right. You're describing the indescribable by describing how indescribable it is.
Yeah, right.
Here's what I have. Here's what I can say. Yeah. Not this, not this, not this. And maybe what you're missing is God that's not capable of being rendered.
Yeah. No. That's a really interesting way of thinking about. I so often give up a topic I'm interested in because I feel like I don't know. I don't understand enough. I can't get there, and therefore I'm gonna put that in my pipe and smoke it. This idea, of maybe approaching something in terms of what I can't, what I can't get to in it.
Right. Yeah, I think that otherwise we think we have to be masters of everything rather than pilgrims. Right. Yeah. Just entering a huge and foreign space, whether that's the space of a page or another person's life or a historical subject, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The task is to go in with your staff and armed with wonder. Right.
Yeah. Wendell Berry has that essay. Now I can't think what it's called, but he contrasts the Hemingway story, The Big Two-Hearted River, with Norman MacLean's River Runs Through It. I guess it's one of his river stories, and says, for Hemingway, he keeps things completely under control. There's a swamp somewhere on that river, but he never gets there. Because, but in order to stay in control, he shrinks his world down so that he doesn't have to get out to anything.
Oh,
Hemingway is
interesting.
so famously controlled, but one way you do that, and Barry says the way that Hemingway did that in this story, is to make sure you don't wander out of what you already have control over. And I'm not sure that's our job as people who do
Yeah.
creative work. And he says, Norman MacLean was willing to let his boat float down into the swamp every now and then, and write about things he didn't fully understand. And I love those
Right.
lines from River Runs Through It, where the son talks about the father and the son loved each other completely, even though they didn't understand each other completely. And that's the nature of love, is
Yeah.
you can love completely without understanding completely. And I think that's
Right.
really relevant to the work that you do as a poet, that any well, I shouldn't say any poet, but the poets I like,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
willing to live and to take a step into those parts that they can't get their arms around.
Yeah. 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 That's great. I love I love giving poetry readings, and I love setting them up and telling the stories behind them and things like that. But my favorite moments are when I have to say, people say, "Where'd that come from?" And I say, "I don't know. That
Yeah,
just arrived entire."
yeah,
Like
yeah.
every once in a while it happens that was beyond me. I made my second book is called The Elegy Beta, and it's an explanation, or it's a thinking through. What's an explanation? It's not an explanation.
Mm.
I'm thinking through the role that angels might play in human history. So the big middle
Mm.
section is 10 poems essentially about the angelic. Now
Uh,
maybe they're in charge of history. Maybe they make things happen, right? Maybe they're mute witnesses to our goings on. Maybe they're messengers from God, right? Maybe they help
mm,
art get born when artists are trying
yeah.
to. They remind us of our tasks,
Mm.
But so much of that poem, that's one of the ones that took. I was at it a little over 10 years,
Mm.
making those. Um, it's mysterious to me still. I just
Yeah.
have some of the images, the way they coalesced and came about. So I read it and I get teary thinking
Mm.
it's outside of myself. Like it's a
Yeah.
gift of some
Yeah.
spirit, in large part.
You it couldn't have happened without you, and yet you didn't make it
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
feeling.
Only I like to say only God can make a tomato. You know, you
Yeah.
got to plant the
Yeah.
tomato, you got to weed, you got to,
No,
but
that's right.
you can't make a tomato.
Hey, I'll do my part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Misha, we got to wrap this thing up. But I usually end these conversations with a question: who are the writers who make you want to write? Who are the poets that make you want to make poetry?
Oh, that's a fun question. Yeah. Um, so I'm really big on these Italian writers.
Hmm.
There's sort of for me a holy trinity of Italians: Giacomo Leopardi, Eugenio Montale, and uh, what's his name? Not Sugimoto. He's a photographer, actually. Quasimodo, Salvatore Quasimodo,
Huh.
are three Italian poets that I really really love and cherish. But this is sort of a hack. But whenever I can't get work done, um, not like he's a hack writer, he's a very good writer, but it's like a lifestyle hack. Whenever I can't seem to get work done, uh, there's a poet that I return to over and over again, Constantine Cavafy,
Huh.
and he makes everything seem so easy that I believe writing poetry is easy. And that's enough for me to get going.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
There are poets that I revere. Like there's a poet on I think Alfred Knopf Press called Richard Kenny, who's just a towering intellect, and I love reading his work. That's the most rewarding thing that I read, is
Uh-huh.
Richard Kenny's poems. But when I read him, I think, oh man, does anybody want to buy a pencil? Because
Yeah.
I'm not going to need it anymore. Like
Yeah.
I'm just
Right.
done.
Yeah.
I don't need to.
Yeah.
But I read Cavafy and I think, oh man, like this is as easy as skipping stones. I could just jump right in. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are the
Yeah.
inspiring. If they're not my favorite, they're the most inspiring poets for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a helpful distinction. You know,
Yeah.
the writers who kind of motivate me, they're not the best ones. But
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
John Milton, but he doesn't make me want to go write an epic poem.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. What a marvel. Yeah. No, it's great.
Yeah.
I'm often being accused of like not being consistent about my recommendations because people are like, oh, but you said this person was your favorite. I'm like, I didn't. I said who's most inspiring,
Yeah.
or he's the
Yeah.
best at this, or that's my favorite
Yeah.
poetry book, which is by someone else.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, Mischa Willett, thanks so much for being here. This has been a lot of fun.
That was a joy to talk with you. Thanks for making the time and for creating this gathering space for us as well.
Well, thanks.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.